We are recording. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. The session is accessible content and inclusive curriculums. I'll be passing over to Catherine Murgatroyd in just a second, who is the font of all wonderful knowledge surrounding all of this. She's a very modest person, so she'll tell you she's not, but she really is. So I'm going to pass to you. To Catherine, and I'll have one or two little bits through the session to help out with, but otherwise, over to you.
Oh, fantastic, Tom. Thank you so much. So I'm going to try and share my screen with everyone so you can see. And what we're hoping for today is a short instruction regarding Blackboard Ally, which Tom will be able to give us later. But before we do that, we're going to be thinking about the limitations of colonial curriculums, how we can make our curriculums inclusive for all students, and the kind of questions we need to be asking ourselves in preparation for a university-wide decolonising agenda. And that in itself is a large holistic piece of work that's in the making. So these are some short-term things we can do to really enhance our curriculum for all students. And I'm going to press the share the screen button and hope for the best. Lots of this software is very, very new for me. So if somebody could give me a nod, if they could see my
yeah, we can see the
fantastic. Excellent. Okay, so the aims of the session today, we're going to understand the function of Blackboard Ally, learn how to use Ally to check for accessibility in Moodle content. And what we're going to hear about first is the roots of awarding gaps, the limitations of colonial curriculums, and develop some questions. Now, before I start, I'd just like to prefix really with a message about the language that we're going to use today. So I'm aware that within this training and sector-wide, we're using the term BME, and actually that this is a problematic term. It's a homogenous term. It's incapable of capturing the multitude of experiences and cultures that it attempts to represent. Really, there are lots of issues with terms when we try and homogenise groups of people. There are issues with terms like people of colour, because we are all actually people of colour. And equally today, I'm going to be using the term white to separate out whiteness. And I think that this is very important in this point in history. We need to recognise that whiteness is a privilege that we need to see. So for the duration of this training, I'm going to be using the terms white and BME, but I wouldn't want you to think that I believe all BME staff and all BME students and all members of BME communities feel the same, experience things the same, and encounter the same issues, challenges or barriers. Now, we're starting off today with a hard truth for us, and that is that we have an awarding gap between our Black and minority ethnic students and our white students. And this is significant across the HE sector. And at the University of Portsmouth for the academic year 18-19, our awarding gap was 22%. So that's the kind of equivalent between a first-class degree and a 2-2. And the Office for Students are very clear that Black and minority ethnic students are being educated in institutions that reproduce, perpetuate and reinforce white privilege. So as I said, awarding gaps really require a long-term holistic intervention, but thinking about decolonising agendas and diversifying our curriculums in the short term can begin to make an immediate difference. And this is particularly important when our real students at the moment is minimised due to a pandemic. And we know that the pandemic can reinforce disadvantage for certain groups of individuals. Now, very briefly, we're going to go back to the beginning, 500 years back, because we need to know the history upon the issues that we face. So we're thinking about colonialisation, imperialism and axiology. And I'm not a history expert, so I'm not going to give you a history lesson, but we are going to think about these important concepts really to underpin our agendas and our values moving forward. So colonialism is the policy or practice of acquiring full or partial control over another country, occupying it with settlers and exploiting it economically. So very much like England did to India. And then imperialism, a policy of extending a country's power to neighbouring countries and neighbouring communities and influence through the process of colonisation, and often with the use of military force. So we might think back to how Rome was a great example of imperialism. And then axiology, the study of the nature of value and valuation of things, and really determining what is of value. So what colonialism did was it went into countries and it decided what was of value in those countries, and we claimed those valuable things. Now, education was misused really in colonisation, and Western nations used education as a tool to reinforce culturally what colonial policies aimed at achieving economically and politically. So yes, we're economically sound in this country and we're politically in charge, but actually we've got a population of people that we need to get on board with our colonisation. And how are we going to do that? We're going to do that through education. So the education created a homogenous cultural space that actually enabled the colonisers to continue with persuasion, coercion and exploitation. And it's kind of very difficult to hear about our history, but actually grappling with it and facing our kind of heritage is something that we really need to do to be able to move on. So it's this clarity about the exploitative nature of the empire that really precedes all of our work in terms of decolonising. So it's fair to say we have colonial curriculums. And the education we receive at universities is predominantly shaped by colonialism, with a prominence of white, Eurocentric scholars and thinkers. And the dividends of colonial empires weren't just spices and gold and tea and precious metals, but actually it was knowledge that flowed back to imperial centres. And what we did is that we took information from the colonised worlds, information that was actually crucial for Western development, and we claimed it and professionalised it and held it up as Western science. So it's argued, we could say, that today's colonial curriculums across all disciplines are unrepresentative in that they selectively construct teachings that exclude crucial narratives. They're inaccessible in the sense that they prevent all students from identifying with the narratives construed, and they're privileged in that they perpetuate advantage and the participation and progression of select groups. And a simple analogy might be that somebody comes and burns down your house and takes all of your possessions and then burns your house down. And your neighbours see that your house is on fire and they phone the fire brigade for you, and the fire brigade come and they have to grapple with enormous flames and smoke and toxins and all of the other hazards that's involved in quashing house fires, and you are there with your house burnt down and your stuff stolen. And the only account of that complex scenario that the world hears is the account from the person who started the fire. And they claim that they started well, they used the correct amount of a kind of accelerants or whatever it is that you might need to start a fire, and they're very pleased with the loot that they were able to get. And the homeowner and the community and the neighbours and the fire brigade and all of those crucial voices and narratives around that example go unheard. And in a sense, that simple analogy kind of represents really what happened in terms of colonial curriculums. And so typically we can pick examples from all disciplines really, but here are some examples. Philosophy and religious teachings are often dominated by white male Eurocentric perspectives. English literature typically centres around white writings, and our BME students find themselves and their histories and the experiences of their ancestors unrepresented and actually erased from academic fields. So what we know is that much valuable, credible knowledge is dismissed. BME perspectives and other marginalised perspectives are drowned in whiteness. And in history, the lives of those populations who were colonised are overlooked for the perspective of British business. They're overlooked for the perspective of the fire setter rather than anybody else. So the task for universities is the decolonising of the entire knowledge economy as a whole and each individual discipline within it. And that's an exceptionally large job, and one that we're facing head on and tackling with really optimism for a better way. Now, most importantly, if we want to prepare students for a global and diverse world, in terms of employability, in terms of social justice, we've got to challenge students' understanding of the world, and our curriculums need to change. Social justice must be explicit in our learning outcomes for all programmes. And I recently did a piece of work with some colleagues who were writing a plant-based nutrition degree. And so we can't possibly get social justice into plant-based nutrition. We want to talk about what plants do for your cells and your body and your energy levels and for growth and repair. And by the end of this piece of work, working together and thinking about social justice, actually, we had a plant-based nutrition degree that was absolutely integrated with social justice issues. For example, the links between poverty and food choices and what foods are accessible, the holding up of the avocado as the superfood of the world for Western liberal, I guess, kind of hipster cafes, but actually the awful social consequences for marginalised indigenous communities who have their water supply diverted so that avocado farms in Chile can sell avocados to the West. And of course, the issues of animal welfare and over aggregation and rainforest kind of destruction. So even when we're thinking, gosh, how are we going to fit social justice into our degrees, actually social justice is fundamental to our programme and can be integrated throughout. So since 2015, UK HEIs have been preparing to overhaul curriculums through the lens of decolonisation. So what I'd like to do now, if I could just hear your ideas, if you could share your understandings of what decolonising is, or maybe even ideas that you're having or steps that you're already taking to make sure that your curriculums are as inclusive as they can be. So I think if we just take a few minutes, and then I really look forward to seeing what you put. Tom, have a go and hopefully it will pop up.
Are you, again, we can't click it. Are you able to copy the URL into the chat with Catherine?
Yeah, certainly. Now, I've embedded this in with fantastic instructions from my TEL colleague, so I'll be so disappointed if it doesn't work.
For it to work, we may need to run the presentation kind of fully.
Okay.
Well,
I'm going to chat. There you go. Fantastic. Feel free, guys, if it looks like, gosh, this is Trixie, feel free to comment in the chat.
Yeah, so what you need to do, Catherine, is if you go to slideshow and start presenting from that slide, I'm seeing stuff come up.
Oh, great.
And so it should then, if it's working how it's meant to work, appear in that window for you.
Is it popping up on your screen, Tom? Yes.
There you go. There you go.
That's
look at
fantastic.
That. As if by web magic.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely my achievement for the day. So one of our participants was lucky enough to go on training delivered from Shades of Noir based at UCL. That's excellent. So any insights or quick wins that you can offer us during this time as we're preparing for TB1 would be really appreciated. Anybody else? Any understanding or ideas or thoughts or confusions or questions that you might want to ask? Mm-hmm.
Oh dear, what have I pressed? That's not meant to happen. There you go. I'm seeing a whole load more answers here. I can read them out for you if you'd like, Catherine.
Yeah, go on, because I've only got one.
Be aware of not perpetuating the myth of the white academic in my research. I added photos of major contributors to an academic poster and was shocked by the whiteness.
Excellent.
Listening to other voices.
Mm-hmm.
And one's still typing. So the one that you can kind of partially see there finishes with regarding attainment gaps for BAME community in arts courses. It was amazing. Brackets, well done, Catherine. Aware but not specifically building in, apart from my subject philosophy, making sure that what you do has potential making sure that what you do has potential implications. How do you start to think about that? So yeah, how do you think about the implications of what you're creating? And there's some more coming in. I don't know if you want to.
No, that's absolutely fantastic. And actually, I think some questions that we're going to look at shortly really will hopefully guide our thought processes through some of the implications. But it is such an enormous task for us all to really start thinking about what perspectives from these authors am I presenting to my students, and how is this leaving some students feeling included and some students feeling marginalised? And is there any other critical perspectives that I could scaffold onto this material to really make my curriculum more diverse? But actually, it isn't just about the BME awarding gap. It's about diversifying all of our scholars and authors and viewpoints to make diversity prominent. So have we got any LGBTQ scholars? And if not, why not? And if we have, are we using them? Are we using their valuable perspective? Right, I'm just going to see if I can minimize my screen, which I can't, so I'm going to plow through. Now, decolonising, we've got a nice my mind's gone blank. Anyway, Kiel University, they've got a nice way of viewing decolonising, and they view it as a way to create spaces and resources for dialogue. And dialogue is so important that it's important that we... Can everybody hear that terrible noise?
Yes.
Yes, that's my builder. So I'm going to take 1 second just to ask them to stop, if that's all right. Gosh.
While Catherine's away, some other comments have come in on the Padlet that they're now appearing on her screen as well, but you'll obviously see them in yours. Feminism in architecture, again, and then there's acknowledging students' lived experience, listening to other voices. I think that's going to be a very key part of that sort of student discussion. Catherine, if you go back to the decolonizing slide, you'll notice that the answers are now populated on your screen as well, just if you want to see any of those. Let's say I was just reading, there's a few there that I think are very sort of pertinent, like feminism in architecture, and again, acknowledging students' experience and listening to the other voices.
Fantastic. Feminism and architecture, excellent. And that's exactly the thing. It's not just about BME, it's about gender representation as well. And are students aware of the patriarchy? And if so, how can we handle that sensitively in the classroom? Excellent. Beware of not perpetuating the myth of the white academic. Yep.
In the chat box of WebEx, Paul has put, one of the challenges he has in his teaching of political thought is building in alternative perspectives and thinkers, but still enabling students to deal with what has previously been seen as the classics. Given the constraints of the timetable, what do you leave out? What should he leave out? And that's obviously a very, very tricky bit to manage. Like you say, the decolonisation of something while still representing the bits that, like you say, are considered classics to the subject area.
No, I think that's such a good question. And I wonder if, while curriculums remain as they are, that in the short term, we're raising questions with our students, helping our students to notice who's represented in the curriculum and encouraging them to seek out alternative scholars and alternative viewpoints. Because I think you're right. If the classics as we know them are white westernized scholars, it's not about erasing the discipline and saying, gosh, these scholars are no longer relevant. It's about saying, actually, let's have a look at who represents philosophy or who represents architecture. What is wrong with this in terms of representation, and who else can you find? Go away and have a look at whatever it might be, kind of a Middle Eastern architecture or female veterinary contributions or whatever it is, so that whilst we might not have time to cover double content, what we can do is instill our students with a kind of critical mindset and a view of social justice. I don't know if that is helpful. So decolonising, creating spaces for dialogue and partnerships so that all members of the university can imagine and envisage all cultures and knowledge systems in the curriculum, and with respect to what's being taught and how it frames the world. And then I've just picked an example here from sociology, a discipline that appears to be all over it in the literature. Decolonising sociology involves a recognition of exploitative and excluded sociological knowledges, a reassessment of who and what counts as canonical within sociology, and a reimagining for what constitutes sociological thought in the first place. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see what all of your disciplines are saying about decolonisation and how they're viewing it. Now, inclusive curriculums really, as we've said, have contents that should cover multiple perspectives, multiple theoretical standpoints and contributions from multiple cultures and backgrounds. And inclusive content facilitates exploration of themes of social justice, including equality, diversity, inclusion and cultural relativity. They enable students to consider their own identity, beliefs, cultural assumptions and unconscious bias. So hopefully, I'm going to paste this into the chat now. If I could have some examples of social justice in your programmes, that would be fantastic. Or if you've got any questions about how you think you might integrate social justice into your programmes. I have my example of the nutrition, plant-based nutrition degree. Right, let's find the chat and hope that this works.
And while Catherine's doing that, a question has come in along that, which is would disenfranchising decolonising the curriculum include disability?
Yeah.
I've put an answer. I wouldn't like to be considered a subject on an expert on the subject. So again, over to you, Catherine.
I think that's exactly right. I think what we know is that there are multiple marginalised groups in society. Yeah, it's really important to be aware of the Equality Act, the 9 characteristics in the Equality Act, and equally the impact of intersectionality. So the experiences of perhaps having a disability, but also being from a Black and minority ethnic group and having a mental health difficulty, and the kind of corrosive impact that has, not only for our students, but for anybody, and the barriers to, I guess, mainstream activity and happenings if you are a marginalised group. So I think diversifying the curriculum isn't just about BME authors, although that is really crucial in terms of our awarding gaps. It's about ensuring that all perspectives are in the curriculum. So writers who have disabilities, writers who are from Indigenous populations, the viewpoints and the narratives of everybody, particularly people who might otherwise be excluded. Now I can see Padlet is popping up as a little reminder for me on my computer, but it's just not popping up on my screen. So Tom,
I suggest going between your slides. So go back to inclusive design and see if it reloads it.
Great.
There you go.
Yeah. Fantastic. Represent Eastern philosophies, and that's exactly right. And sometimes I think, gosh, the West basically kind of in a nutshell rejected the East, and then over recent decades what we're seeing is a kind of creeping back. Oh, there might be something in meditation after all, and there might be something to help us in terms of spirituality after all. Radical acceptance, there might be something in that. After rejecting Eastern philosophies for a long time, what we can see is now we're kind of dipping a toe in and building on that knowledge base. Yeah, ensuring student representation is key in everything we do. Exactly. Lots of time to discuss different languages and how English gets used in African countries, Asia and so forth. Yes, it does. And actually, sometimes when I watch videos of Black advocates, lots of African nations talk about how they had our language really forced upon them, to great detriment to them and their Indigenous knowledges. Our school has started aligning their learning outcomes against an ethos of matters of care. Fantastic. I don't know what matters of care is, but if it's value based in terms of social justice and empathy, that's just an excellent thing.
There's a comment that sort of follows on from that, which is I'm not sure what the outcome will be, but it is a challenge levelled at all modules. And your represent Eastern philosophies has a bit to it. I'll read out just for the. Oh no, there you go. You've refreshed it. There it is.
Brilliant. Oh yeah, in teaching VSM, which is based on holism and emergence and recursion, which reductionism tends to reject. Yeah, I don't know what VSM is, but agreed. Our school has started aligning the learn. Yeah. Fantastic. I think this university just has so many strengths in terms of the things that people are getting on and doing and kind of driving these social justice agendas forward. It's just really impressive. So what I've got now, I'm aware that we haven't got too much time left, and I'm hope that I haven't just kind of chewed your ear off. But there are just some questions, and I think thinking through these questions or running through them might be a good starting point when we're reflecting on and diversifying our own curriculums. And what I've also done is attached a decolonising checklist to these slides. So what you can do in the very short term, if it was helpful, is just have a look at what SOAS are saying, or go to Advanced HE, or find your own decolonising kind of materials, ask ourselves these questions and think about what we can do so that when our students are distanced from us, or even if they are on campus, that we're starting to really reflect our diverse student body in the materials that we present. I feel I'm rushing through. So can we diversify? What's the demographic profile of our authors? What is the effect of this on the diversity of views with which the students are presented? Can we reorganise material in our syllabus to bring different issues to prominence, in particular through scaffolding various kinds of critical perspectives onto earlier sessions? Are we aware of our course's history? I'm kind of aware that I taught social work for many years, really only understanding the last, 60 years of its being. Is my subject contextualised in its historical moment, making explicit the kinds of research programmes, assumptions and aspirations that generated it? To what extent does my module or course allow students to understand the origins and the purposes of the field of study in its historical context? Could an understanding, if absent, be introduced? Could that be an activity? And then decolonising our research paradigms, which really all originate from Western thought. Academia has almost been exclusively focused on Western paradigms and approaches. Indigenous research paradigms might be considered as research objects, something of value for us to explore, but not accepted as respected co-equals in Western universities. And this manifestation of ontological oppression is a result of Western science being exported around the globe from Europe alongside imperialistic and colonial attitudes. And there's an excellent paper from Sage in the reference list, if you wanted to have a look at that, that is really excellent at grappling with some of those questions. To what extent does the content of my module presume a particular profile, mindset of student and their orientation of the world? Is it heteronormative? Is it predominantly male? Is it predominantly white? Is the voice of individuals with disabilities or mental health difficulties prominent in any way in how we're considering perspectives? What is the effect of this on engagement? And upskill our students on whiteness. We're hoping to begin a programme of kind of supportive sessions for academic colleagues. I'm hoping to call them Brave Space Workshops. That name hasn't been approved yet, so it may not be called that. But the function of this is to support colleagues who may appreciate that assistance in having difficult conversations in the classroom, confronting whiteness, confronting privilege, unpicking our identities and our bias and our views. So white privilege recognises the advantage that white people have due to structural considerations and systemic racism. White supremacy represents the view white people are superior to non-white counterparts, and white fragility reflects the feelings of anger, denial or defensiveness exhibited by white people when confronted with structural racism and racial inequality. And white fragility is something we may see on campus or in classrooms if we're trying to have these difficult conversations. This slide here, do check this slide out, because this slide is about how we can become an ally in our role as tutor, in our role as lecturer, whatever our role is, to students from diverse backgrounds, so that really we can demonstrate allyship, whatever our own privilege or disadvantage may be. To each one of those is a link for helpful tips and just to use our voice and our power really as facilitators to be supportive. And a little video here, which I just tagged in because I just love the video so much. It's just a 1 minute 50-second video on microaggressions, and I know microaggressions isn't a new term, but it really helps us all and our students be really mindful of our language and anything that might kind of contribute to othering some of our students. And then here's the toolkit. Oh, I'll put that twice. here's a nice little slide here to remind us real equality isn't possible if we don't celebrate and champion our differences. And we have a prescribed PowerPoint background for the Telltale Festival, so I've had to just stick it in there as a happy picture for us to all look at. Yes, the video links, I can, yeah, I will. I'll put the video link in. It's only 1 minute 57. Right. Any questions before I hand over to Tom? If anyone had any questions, you could put in the chat.
Rebecca's got one here which says, is there a place where all these separate efforts are collected or cross-pollinated?
I don't, to be honest, I don't actually think there is at the moment. I've joined the university very, very recently with a role to decolonising the curriculum, and post Telltale Festival, because I've only been with the university. How long have I been here, Tom? 4 weeks or 5 weeks?
Yeah,
something like that.
Maybe 2 months at most.
Yeah. The first job really is to do exactly that, find out exactly what's going on, who's doing what, how can we really map out everything that's going on in the university to identify gaps, identify areas to build upon, and identify strengths. So I think that's coming, but I wouldn't know if we already had it. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Now, Tom hopefully will give us a short instructional demonstration on how we can use Blackboard Ally, which is a fantastic piece of kit that's embedded into Moodle.
Yes, so thank you very much, Catherine. That's very informative and really interesting. This is a minor extension to kind of everything that Catherine's been sort of talking about today, in that we have something called Blackboard Ally, which doesn't relate to Catherine's point of being a tutor as an ally, which is obviously a very useful thing to have. For those that don't know, what Ally does is allow us to see how accessible content is to students who may need it in different versions. So again, it's not about any one particular group, or other than making it accessible to every group, no matter what differences people may have. So you can see here that my PDF and my PowerPoint have got red kind of gauges, I guess you'd call them. There are 3 colors. There's red, there's orange, and there is green. If I scroll down the page, I have some there where one is green, one is red, and one is orange. And what it's telling me is how accessible that content is. What you can do is click on the icon, and it overlays, albeit slowly at the moment, what is wrong with your PDF, your PowerPoint. And so it's saying this PDF is untagged. Now, I don't know what that means. Oh, what does this mean? It's almost too easy. And it's basically explaining what the different bits of it needs to be done and how you can make it more accessible. So how do I tag a PDF? I have that. And again, it gives me a step-by-step guide on how to do that. So can I get hold of the original version? Because obviously a PDF is essentially like a printed version of something else that may have been made in Word, or in this case PowerPoint. But I can go, yes, I can get a copy of that. What was it made in? So it's a Microsoft Office product. And then it will go through and give me the step-by-step with screenshots of how to change and adapt it. Depending on, so this PowerPoint from today, the reason this will be inaccessible is its images are the images are missing what's called alt text or descriptions. So essentially what it means is, not Office 365, doesn't matter. It means what you're doing is providing an image like this with text. So while the welcome and the telltales are all text on the slide, things like this Ferris wheel and all these other elements are photos or images that don't have text to tell a student. So as you can see in the description down the side, they've got Van Gogh's Starry Night. And what you do is you add alt text, and as if by magic, let me just try and get rid of this. There we go. So I select the image that I need to add alt text to. I choose format. And he says, I did it in Word a second ago. I know it's here. There you go. Under shape options of the format shape, I have this box here, where at the bottom it says alt text. So I give it a title box. And I click off, and that now has alt text to it. So again, if I upload this, it's going to start giving me more information. You can set, and I can't remember exactly and very quickly how to do it in PowerPoint, but you can set certain images. So like these ones here, you can set them to be what's called decorative. Essentially, they're not actually displaying anything other than that it's a purple box, so that it doesn't have to be looked at from a screen reader's perspective. What you would do is do it more for stuff like Starry Night, where you give it a title and a description around the actual image and what that means. Again, you won't see it on screen. As you can see, it hasn't added anything here. It's all in the back end. Even when you create it as a PDF, it will take that alternative text and make it accessible for every student that wants to use it. Now, with that in mind as well, very quickly, I get rid of ally for the moment. You'll also notice from next to the icon, there is this A with an arrow. Now, the student will not see this gauge. They won't see how accessible your content is or isn't. That is purely a guide for you to try and improve the materials that you're producing going forward. And again, a lot of this is essentially, once you get in the habit of adding alt text and knowing how to do headings and that kind of stuff, you just do it as second nature anyway. I've started that with all my pieces of work. But here, the alternative formats, what this allows for is the student can see this, and they can download it in a range of different versions. So again, a structured PDF, a HTML, ePublisher, electronic braille, audio version, and a Beeline reader, which is again an enhanced on-screen reading piece of software. So you can download that and listen to it or view it in whatever format is accessible to you as the learner. So as I say, the student doesn't see the gauge, but they do see the alternative text format. You'll notice it doesn't do it on things like the Moodle book. And the reason being is the Moodle book is integrated in Moodle, is online text, so is automatically built within an accessible framework. So a screen reader will be able to read about the book, about a Moodle page, and the content that would subsequently be within that. However, if you added a PDF or something in there, you'd need to make sure that, again, it follows that accessibility kind of sort of checking. So that's kind of it from Ally for the moment. It is quite a short little demo of just what it means, so you know what those symbols mean on your screen. Did I set up the download content, or is it automatic? No, it's automatic. It just does it for you. The Ally is the tool that does it for us. So I just upload a document, and it will eventually update that. If I refresh my page now, that Word document may also get a gauge. It does do it. It can take a little while, depending on how much it has to process.
Can I just say, Tom, the wonderful thing about Ally is, for example, if you haven't been able to get to any of the creating accessible content sessions that are running through the Telltale Festival, or if you're not familiar with the accessibility checks that are actually embedded already in PowerPoint and Word, Ally, you don't really need to understand how to make your documents accessible, because Ally will tell you. So, worst case scenario, you produce a document that isn't accessible. Actually, Ally will tell you what's wrong with it, and it will tell you how to fix it. In an ideal world, it's much better to create accessible documents first time round, save you having to go through and change things, and understand that we can't just use a bigger font size and claim that that's a heading, because a screen reader won't read it, and we must add alt text to our kind of boxes so that screen readers can actually describe what those images are. But if we're not upskilled in relation to creating accessible documents yet, Ally is a really safe kind of backstop for us. But it is really important that we use it. We need to have a look at the accessibility scores and see what they're saying. And really, we should not be putting any documents on Moodle that are having a red score. I mean, a red score means this document is not accessible to every student. And if it isn't accessible to every student, then, you know, that's kind of, firstly, unlawful, but secondly, unethical. So we really mustn't be doing it. So it's very, very helpful that we've got this tool that can give us a kind of a last minute stop, but making sure we're not getting it wrong.
And just to pick up on that, Catherine's quite right. It will, again, give you the report and show you the step-by-step. What it doesn't do is do the changes for you. You still have to manually make those changes. So although it's a really powerful tool that tells you the problems that there may be with accessibility within a document, it won't fix them other than tell you how to fix them. So like Catherine says, the first few you may do it and it tells you how to fix them. Essentially, you're going to save yourself time by making it accessible first time round as you start producing new content and amending content, rather than uploading it, changing it, re-uploading it, and adding another step in there. Again, I understand that not everyone knows essentially what to do, and Ally, as Catherine said, is a perfect way to kind of get that first document done. But once you start to know how to make things accessible, if you follow that guidance that Ally will tell you, you will then save yourself a lot of extra work later on down the line. Does anyone else have any more questions? Predominantly for Catherine, but again, if there's anything I can answer, I will try and do so as well. But
I will just say, if anyone would like to talk through anything at all with me, or please do get in touch. Please do email me. I'm really happy to help in any way I can.
if there's nothing else, I'll say thank you very much, Catherine, for a very informative session. I do hope everyone else found it as useful as I did. And again, please do contact Catherine or myself for more technical stuff going forward if you need any help.
Yes, thanks so much, everyone. Thanks for coming. Hopefully you enjoy the rest of the festival, and we'll see you at some future sessions. Thanks, everyone. Bye.